Emma was only 8 years old, a cheerful little girl with wide eyes that seemed to see kindness where others only saw fear. She lived in a small but lively neighborhood where children played in the park, neighbors chatted across fences, and the streets echoed with the sound of bicycles and laughter. Every afternoon when the school bell rang, Emma would walk home carrying her colorful lunchbox. Inside was usually a sandwich, fruit, and sometimes a cookie her mother tucked in with love. Emma loved to take the long way home. Instead of rushing back like most children, she preferred to walk slowly, noticing the flowers blooming along the fences, the sound of birds resting on wires, and even the cracks in the sidewalk. She liked to stop near the old oak tree that stood proudly by the corner of the street. On this particular afternoon, the air was warm and filled with the golden glow of sunlight. Emma skipped along, humming a tune her teacher had taught the class. But as she reached the corner near the old oak, she noticed something unusual. Sitting under the shadow of the tree was a large dog. At first, Emma froze. The animal looked nothing like the small, friendly pets she had seen wagging their tails in neighbors' yards. This one was big, strong, and dusty, with fur that seemed neglected for too long. It was a German shepherd, a breed she had only seen in books and television shows. The dog's ears were alert, standing high, and its eyes were fixed on her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Emma's heart pounded. She had been told many times not to approach strange animals. Some could bite and others might be sick. For a brief moment she thought about turning around and taking another street home. But then her gaze fell on the dog's body. She noticed its ribs faintly visible beneath its fur, the way its shoulders curved forward as though it had not eaten properly for days. Its tail didn't wag. Instead, it rested still, almost lifeless on the ground. Emma felt something stir inside her, an emotion stronger than fear. It was sympathy. She clutched her lunchbox tightly. Inside, she still had the sandwich her mother had packed, fresh bread with cheese and vegetables. She remembered her mother's words. "Always finish your lunch, Emma. Food is a gift, and nothing should go to waste." But as Emma looked at the dog, she thought, maybe I don't need all of it today. Carefully, she opened the box and pulled out the sandwich. The dog's ears twitched at the sound of rustling paper. Its eyes followed her every move. For a moment, the street became silent, as if waiting to see what would happen next. Emma took a deep breath and whispered softly, "Are you hungry?" She crouched down, holding the sandwich in her small hands. The dog didn't move at first. Its body tensed and its eyes flickered between the food and the girl. Emma knew it must be scared too, unsure if it could trust her. She extended her hand just a little further, making sure not to rush. "It's okay," she whispered again. The German shepherd lowered its head and sniffed the air cautiously. Then step by step it began to move forward. Each step was heavy, hesitant, like the ground itself could betray it. Emma's fingers trembled, but she held her ground. Finally, the dog reached her, lowered its nose, and sniffed the sandwich. For one long second, Emma thought it might bark or snap, but instead the dog carefully opened its mouth, gently took the sandwich from her hand, and stepped back. It chewed slowly, as though savoring every bite, and Emma smiled. Relief washed over her. "See? You're not scary at all," she said softly. The dog's eyes met hers for the first time, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust. From across the street, a woman carrying groceries stopped to watch. She frowned and called out, "Emma, stay away from that dog. It could be dangerous." But Emma simply waved and said, "He's hungry." That's all. The woman shook her head and walked away, muttering about careless children. When the last crumbs of the sandwich were gone, the German shepherd licked its lips and sat back down. Its eyes never left Emma, as though it was studying her just as much as she studied it. She tilted her head and giggled. "You look like a shadow," she said suddenly. "Yes, that's what I'll call you, Shadow." The dog blinked, and though it did not move closer, its expression softened. Emma carefully closed her empty lunchbox, stood up, and began to walk away. To her surprise, she heard the soft sound of paws behind her. She turned and saw Shadow following at a distance, not too near, not too far. All the way to her house, the big stray walked silently behind her. When she reached her front gate, Emma turned and said, "You should go now. This is my home." Shadow stopped as though he understood and sat down on the edge of the sidewalk. His posture was tall and alert, almost like a guard. Emma's heart warmed. She waved goodbye and stepped inside. That night at dinner, Emma told her parents what had happened. Her mother gasped in worry and her father frowned. "Emma, you must be careful. Stray dogs are not pets. They might be dangerous." "But he wasn't dangerous," Emma insisted. "He was gentle. He was just hungry." Her parents exchanged worried glances. "Still, promise us you won't go near him again," her father said firmly. Emma nodded, but deep inside she knew she had made a new friend. As she lay in bed, she thought about the German shepherd's eyes. They weren't the eyes of a wild, dangerous beast. They were the eyes of someone who had been lonely for far too long. She whispered into the darkness of her room, "Good night, Shadow," before drifting off to sleep. The next day, as Emma walked to school with her lunchbox swinging by her side, she wondered if Shadow would be waiting near the oak tree again. Her heart beat a little faster with excitement. She didn't know why, but she felt something important had just begun. The next morning, Emma woke up earlier than usual. She rushed through her breakfast, packed her small lunchbox, and hurried out the door. Her parents thought she was simply excited for school, but in truth, her heart was full of curiosity. She wanted to see if Shadow would be waiting for her again. As she walked down the familiar streets, her eyes searched every corner. When she reached the big oak tree near the bend, her steps slowed. For a moment, she thought the dog might have left and that their meeting the previous day had been nothing more than a passing moment. But then, from behind the bushes, two sharp ears appeared. A moment later, Shadow stepped out, his eyes fixed on Emma. Emma's face lit up. "You're here," she whispered happily. She opened her lunchbox and took out half of the sandwich her mother had packed. She sat down on the curb, placing the food on her lap. Shadow approached slowly, still careful. But this time there was less hesitation in his steps. He sniffed the sandwich, then gently took it from her hand, chewing with quiet satisfaction. Emma giggled. "You really like sandwiches, don't you?" she said. Shadow tilted his head as if he understood her. For the rest of the walk, the big German shepherd followed her at a distance, his paws making almost no sound on the pavement. It felt strange and comforting at the same time. Emma thought to herself, "It's like I have my own secret friend." At the school gates, some of her classmates noticed the dog. "Emma, is that your pet?" one boy asked with wide eyes. "No," Emma replied softly. "He's just my friend." "Looks scary," another child muttered before running off. Shadow stayed at the gate, never stepping onto the school grounds, simply watching. His watchful eyes followed Emma until she disappeared into the building. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, Emma came out of the schoolyard and found Shadow sitting exactly where she had left him. Other parents frowned, some whispering about the big stray dog. A teacher even suggested calling animal control, but Shadow did not growl or bark. He simply wagged his tail slowly when Emma approached. She placed her hand gently on his back. His fur was rough and he smelled of dust, but she didn't care. "Let's go home," she said. And Shadow followed quietly. Over the next few days, this became their routine. Every morning, Shadow would appear on her way to school. Every afternoon, he would be there waiting for her. Emma saved pieces of her sandwich each day, sometimes even slipping bits of fruit into her lunchbox to share with him. She spoke to him as though he were a person, telling him about her day, her favorite stories, and even the songs she learned in class. Shadow listened patiently, his ears twitching whenever she said his name. Slowly, Emma began to notice changes in him. His tail wagged more often. His eyes no longer looked empty but bright and alert. When she read her storybook aloud while sitting by the curb, he would lie beside her, his head resting on his paws, as if he enjoyed the sound of her voice. But not everyone saw Shadow the way Emma did. Some neighbors avoided the streets when they saw him. "That dog is too big for a little girl," one woman complained. "It's dangerous. Someone should do something." Others warned Emma's parents that strays could not be trusted. One evening, Emma's father looked serious as he sat at the dinner table. "Emma," he began, "people are saying this dog is following you. It worries us. Stray animals can carry problems. It isn't safe." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But Papa, he's not dangerous. He's kind. He's my friend." Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We know you mean well, sweetheart. But not everyone sees him the way you do. Maybe you should stop feeding him." Emma shook her head firmly. "I can't. He has no one. He waits for me every day. If I don't give him food, he'll go hungry." Her parents exchanged glances. They didn't want to break her heart, but they were afraid for her safety. Finally, her father sighed. "Be careful. Keep your distance. If he shows any sign of trouble, you must stay away. Emma nodded, but deep inside she knew Shadow would never harm her. The very next day proved her right. As she walked home from school, 3 older boys from another street began teasing her. They blocked her path, laughing and mocking her small size. One boy reached out to snatch her lunchbox, but before he could touch it, a deep growl filled the air. Shadow stepped forward from behind the tree, his fur bristling, his eyes sharp and protective. The boys froze, fear flashing across their faces. None of them dared to move closer. Without barking or snapping, Shadow simply stood there tall and strong, his presence enough to send the bullies running. Emma clutched her lunchbox to her chest and whispered, "Thank you, Shadow." She patted his head gently, her little fingers brushing against his rough fur. Shadow lowered his head slightly as if to say, "You are safe with me." From that day on, Emma felt even closer to him. Shadow was not just a hungry dog anymore. He was her protector, her silent guardian. Wherever she went, he was never too far behind. But while Emma's heart grew lighter with his company, the adults around her grew more uneasy. Some neighbors argued that the dog should be taken away before something bad happened. Emma overheard whispers at the corner shop. "That stray has gotten too comfortable. It's only a matter of time before trouble comes." Emma tried to ignore them, but worry lingered at the back of her mind. She knew her father was still considering calling animal control. The thought of Shadow being taken away made her stomach twist with fear. She couldn't imagine her walk to school without him waiting at the oak tree, without his steady paws behind her, without his calm eyes watching over her. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma stared at the ceiling. She remembered how Shadow had appeared when she needed him, how he protected her from the bullies, how he listened to her stories without judgment. She whispered softly into the dark, "Don't leave me, Shadow. Please stay." Outside, beneath the pale glow of the streetlight, Shadow sat quietly near her house. His strong figure was silhouetted against the night sky. He didn't know the exact words the little girl had spoken, but he understood the feeling behind them. His ears twitched and his tail brushed the ground once, as if making a promise. The bond between the little girl and the stray had grown stronger than anyone could have expected. What started with a sandwich had become something deeper: trust, loyalty, and silent companionship. Neither of them knew it yet, but their connection was about to be tested in ways that would surprise the entire neighborhood. The days passed, and Shadow's presence became a part of Emma's life. Every morning he followed her quietly, and every afternoon he waited faithfully near the school gate. Children began whispering stories about the big German shepherd. Some said he was Emma's secret bodyguard. Others said he had been sent by angels to protect her. To Emma, he was simply Shadow, her friend, her listener, her quiet protector. But not everyone in the neighborhood saw things the same way. Adults grew restless and rumors spread quickly. People complained that the dog looked dangerous, that he might attack someone one day. "It's not safe to have a stray wandering around children," one parent said at the school gates. Another added, "That dog needs to be taken away before something bad happens." Emma overheard these words more than once, and each time her heart sank. She wanted to shout that Shadow was gentle, that he never barked or bit, that he only wanted kindness. But she was just a little girl, and her voice was too small against the louder worries of adults. One evening, Emma's father sat down at the dinner table with a heavy look on his face. "Emma," he said gently, "we need to talk about the dog. People are complaining. They think it's not safe. I think it's time to call animal control." Emma dropped her spoon, her eyes wide with panic. "No, Papa. Please don't. Shadow hasn't hurt anyone. He protects me. He even scared away bullies who tried to take my lunchbox." Her father frowned. "That may be true, but we cannot take chances. He is still a stray, and stray animals can be unpredictable." Emma's mother tried to calm the room. "Maybe we should wait a little longer," she said softly. "Emma has grown attached to him. Let's not rush." But Emma could see in her father's eyes that his mind was almost made up. Fear wrapped around her chest like a cold chain. She could not imagine her days without Shadow waiting for her, without his steady paws behind her on the walk home. That night, as Emma lay in bed, she peeked out of the window. And there he was, Shadow sitting near the sidewalk, his tall figure outlined against the moonlight. His ears were alert, his body still, like a silent guard watching over the house. Emma pressed her face to the glass and whispered, "They don't understand you, but I do. Please don't leave me." The next morning, she walked to school with worry weighing down her steps. To her relief, Shadow was there again, wagging his tail slowly when he saw her. She smiled through her sadness and gave him half of her sandwich as always. "I think they want to take you away," she said quietly. Shadow didn't understand the words, but he leaned closer, brushing his rough fur against her hand. It felt like a promise he wasn't going anywhere. As days went on, the neighborhood grew more tense. The news of burglaries spreading across the town only made people more uneasy. Several homes had been broken into at night and valuables stolen. Locks were broken, windows shattered. Fear began to creep into every household. Parents told their children not to play outside too late, and shopkeepers closed their stores earlier than usual. Emma's father became extra cautious. He checked the doors twice every evening and warned Emma to come straight home after school. "There are bad people out there," he said. "It's not safe to wander." One evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows grew longer, Emma was walking home. She noticed that Shadow was acting different. He was not as calm as usual. His ears twitched constantly, and he kept looking around as though sensing something unseen. Emma paused. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. Shadow gave a low growl, not at her, but at the empty street behind them. His body stiffened, his tail stood straight, and his eyes narrowed. Emma turned quickly but saw nothing. Still, she trusted his instincts. Holding her lunchbox tightly, she hurried home with Shadow walking close beside her, his steps firm and protective. When she told her mother about it later, her mother smiled gently. "He must have heard something. Dogs are very good at noticing things we cannot. But still, Emma, be careful." That night, Emma's father discussed the recent burglaries again. "This area is not as safe as it used to be," he said seriously. "I heard the police caught 2 thieves near the market last week, but others are still out there. We must stay alert." He then glanced at Emma and added, "And this is why I don't like having a stray dog so close to our house. What if something happens?" Emma wanted to shout that Shadow was the safest thing that had happened to them, but she held her tongue. Later that night, Emma peeked through the curtains again. Shadow was still there, lying across the edge of the garden like a soldier on duty. His chest rose and fell slowly, but his ears remained sharp. Even when resting, he seemed aware of everything around him. Emma felt safe knowing he was there, but the unease in the neighborhood kept growing. One neighbor suggested loudly that animal control should remove Shadow, claiming he might attack if startled. Another complained that he barked at night, though in truth he only barked when strangers passed by. Emma wanted to defend him, but her small voice was drowned out by fear and suspicion. The tension built like a storm cloud. Emma's father finally decided. "Tomorrow morning I will call animal control," he announced one evening. "It's better for everyone's safety." Emma's heart broke. Tears filled her eyes, but she said nothing. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Shadow. That night she cried quietly into her pillow, whispering to herself, "Please, something has to happen to show them you're not bad." Outside, Shadow remained at his post, unaware of the decision that could take him away. He stood silently in the yard, his eyes scanning the street, his nose twitching at every sound. The moonlight reflected off his fur, and he looked less like a stray and more like a guardian placed there for a purpose. And then, fate began to move. Late into the night, while the world slept, shadows crept along the edge of the neighborhood. 2 figures dressed in dark clothing moved quietly, their eyes on Emma's house. They had chosen their target carefully, thinking it would be an easy one. They carried tools to break locks, their footsteps muffled against the ground. The night was still, but they did not realize someone was already watching. Shadow's ears pricked up. His eyes narrowed and his body tensed. The air carried the faint smell of strangers, sharp and unfamiliar. He stood slowly, his tail stiff, his muscles coiled. The intruders moved closer, unaware of the silent guardian standing in the shadows. Emma, fast asleep in her room, shifted in her bed. She had no idea that danger was drawing near, or that her faithful friend was about to prove himself in a way no one could ignore. The night was silent, with only the soft sound of crickets in the garden. The moon cast a silver glow on the street, and the houses stood still, their windows dark. Inside Emma's home, everyone was asleep. But outside, 2 figures in dark clothes crept quietly, their movements quick and practiced. They whispered to each other, pointing at the side of the house where a window was half hidden behind tall bushes. The men thought the family inside would never know until it was too late. They carried small tools to break the locks, their steps careful, their hands steady. They had done this before, and they felt confident. But they didn't know that Emma's house was not unprotected. Near the edge of the garden, Shadow lay on the ground, his head resting between his paws. His body looked still, but his ears twitched at every sound. His nose caught scents on the wind, familiar ones of the family inside and strange ones that did not belong. His eyes snapped open. The smell of strangers was sharp, full of tension. His body stiffened. Shadow lifted his head, his ears standing tall. He saw movement, 2 figures creeping toward the house. His muscles tightened. For a moment he stayed quiet, watching. His instincts told him these men were not harmless. They carried the scent of danger. The burglars reached the side window and began working quickly. One bent low with a tool in hand while the other kept watch. They were confident no one had seen them. But then a low sound broke the silence. It was not loud but deep, a growl that rolled through the night like distant thunder. The man holding the tool froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. The other frowned. "It's just the wind. Keep working." But the growl came again, louder this time. A shadow moved from behind the bushes. The burglars turned their heads slowly and froze in fear. There, only a few steps away, stood a huge German shepherd. His fur bristled, his teeth visible, his eyes burning with warning. Shadow stepped forward, his paws silent but his growl deep and steady. His body blocked the path, his posture powerful and commanding. The burglars panicked. "It's a dog," one hissed, stepping back quickly. Shadow barked once, a loud, sharp sound that shattered the quiet night. Lights flickered on in the houses nearby. Curtains moved as sleepy neighbors peered outside. Shadow barked again, louder this time, his voice echoing through the street. Inside Emma's room, she woke with a start. She sat up in bed, her heart racing. "Shadow?" she whispered, hurrying to the window. She saw him in the garden, standing tall, barking fiercely at 2 men dressed in black. Her eyes widened with fear. "Papa, Mama!" she shouted. Her parents rushed to her room, alarmed. Her father looked out the window and saw the intruders frozen in place, too shocked to move. Shadow lunged forward, not to bite, but to drive them back. The burglars stumbled, their tools falling to the ground. "Get out of here!" One of them shouted to the other, panic in his voice. The neighbors, now fully awake, stepped onto their porches. Someone called out, "What's happening?" Another neighbor grabbed a phone and called the police. Shadow kept barking, his voice fierce and relentless. The burglars realized they had no chance. They turned and ran down the street, tripping over themselves in their rush to escape. Shadow chased them only as far as the gate, his body a wall of strength, making sure they would not come back. Then he stopped, standing guard as the echoes of their footsteps faded into the night. Emma's father rushed outside. For a moment he froze, staring at the big German shepherd. Shadow stood tall, his chest heaving, but his eyes softened as soon as he saw the family. Emma's father slowly stepped closer, his heart pounding not with fear but with realization. This dog had just saved them. Emma came running behind him, her small hands clutching her nightdress. "Shadow saved us," she cried. "I told you he was good. I told you." Her mother hugged her tightly, relief flooding her face. The neighbors gathered around, whispering in awe. Some who had once feared the dog now looked at him with respect. Minutes later, the police arrived. They listened carefully to what had happened. One officer bent down to collect the tools the burglars had dropped. "These men have been breaking into homes all over town," he said. "We've been looking for them. Your dog stopped them just in time." "He's not our dog," Emma's father began, then paused. His eyes shifted to Shadow, who was now sitting calmly beside Emma, his head resting gently against her arm. The way Shadow looked at her with loyalty shining in his eyes told a different story. "He protected us," the officer said firmly. "If not for him, tonight could have ended very differently." Emma hugged Shadow tightly, burying her face into his rough fur. "You're my hero," she whispered. Her father stood silent for a long moment. The man who had once feared the stray, who had once thought of calling animal control, now saw him in a new light. He saw not a stray but a guardian, not a danger but a protector. The neighbors nodded in agreement. One woman said softly, "That dog is brave. We were wrong about him." Another added, "He saved your family. He deserves a home." Shadow looked up, his ears twitching, his body finally relaxed. For the first time in a long while, he seemed to feel like he belonged. That night, as the police drove away and the neighbors returned to their homes, Emma's family stood together in the garden. The stars sparkled above, the air cool and quiet again. Shadow lay down at Emma's feet, his tail brushing the ground gently. Emma's father crouched down slowly. He reached out his hand, his palm trembling slightly. Shadow lifted his head and sniffed the hand, then pressed his nose against it softly. For Emma's father, it was a moment of truth. He looked at his daughter, then at the dog, and said quietly, "He's not just your friend, Emma. He's part of our family now." Emma's eyes filled with tears of joy. She hugged Shadow tightly once more, whispering, "You'll never be alone again." Shadow closed his eyes, resting his head against her. For the first time in years, he felt warmth, safety, and love. The night that began with fear had ended with trust, and everyone knew that something extraordinary had happened. The morning after the frightening night felt different in Emma's home. The sun shone through the curtains, filling the rooms with warm light. Birds sang on the branches outside, and yet there was something stronger in the air, something like peace. For the first time in a long while, Emma's family felt safe. At the breakfast table, Emma couldn't stop smiling. Shadow was lying near the back door, resting quietly. His ears perked up whenever someone spoke, and his eyes stayed calm but alert. Emma kept sneaking glances at him, her heart swelling with happiness. Her father sipped his tea slowly, his mind full of thoughts. He finally set his cup down and said, "Last night I realized something important. We were afraid of Shadow because we didn't understand him, but he was never a danger. He was a guardian. Without him, who knows what would have happened?" Emma's mother nodded. "He saved us. That means he belongs here. He belongs with us." Emma's face lit up. She jumped from her chair, ran to Shadow, and hugged him tightly. "Did you hear that, Shadow? You're not a stray anymore. You're part of our family now." Shadow wagged his tail slowly, his eyes soft. He pressed his nose gently against her cheek as though he understood every word. News of what happened spread quickly through the neighborhood. By mid-morning, several neighbors stopped by. Some came out of curiosity, others out of guilt. They had been the ones who once whispered about the dangerous stray. Now they stood at the gate, praising the same dog they had feared. One elderly man said, "That German Shepherd saved us all, not just your house. If the thieves had escaped, who knows whose home they would have broken into next?" Another woman, who had once demanded that animal control be called, lowered her head in shame. "I was wrong about him," she admitted softly. "He's not dangerous. He's a hero." Emma's father looked at Shadow, then at the neighbors, and replied, "Yes, he is, and he's staying with us." From that day on, Shadow's life changed completely. He was no longer a lonely stray searching for scraps on the street. Emma's family gave him a proper bath, washing away the dirt and dust that had clung to his fur for so long. His coat shone again, dark and rich, and his eyes sparkled with new life. Emma brushed his fur every day, humming songs while Shadow sat patiently, enjoying the gentle care. Her father built a small wooden shelter for him in the garden, but more often than not, Shadow preferred to stay near the back door or even inside the house, where he could keep watch over the family. He quickly learned the sounds of home, the creak of the stairs, the clink of plates at dinner, the laughter of Emma as she told stories. For Emma, life felt brighter. She woke each morning eager to greet her loyal friend. Walking to school was no longer just a routine. It was an adventure. Shadow walked beside her proudly, his head held high, his steps confident. Other children who once feared him now admired him. Some even asked if they could pet him, and to their surprise, Shadow was gentle, lowering his head politely to let their small hands touch his fur. One day, the teacher asked Emma to share a story in front of the class. Emma stood proudly and spoke about Shadow, the day she gave him a sandwich, how he had followed her, how people misunderstood him, and finally, how he had saved her family from danger. The children listened with wide eyes, and when she finished, the classroom erupted in applause. For the first time, Emma felt that her voice was strong enough to make others understand. Meanwhile, Shadow's reputation grew beyond the school and neighborhood. The local newspaper wrote an article about the stray dog who became a hero. A photograph of Shadow sitting beside Emma appeared in print. People who read the story admired the bond between the little girl and the dog, calling it a reminder that kindness can change lives. Emma's father received visits from police officers who wanted to thank Shadow again. "Not every hero wears a uniform," one officer said with a smile. "Sometimes a hero has 4 legs and a loyal heart." At night, Shadow continued his silent duty. He would lie near the doorway, his ears sharp, his body still, always watching. But now he was no longer alone. He had food, water, a warm place, and most importantly, a family who loved him. One evening, as Emma sat in the garden with a storybook, Shadow lay beside her. She leaned against his strong body while reading aloud. The golden sunset bathed them both in light. Her father watched from the porch, shaking his head in wonder. "All this began with a sandwich," he whispered to himself. Her mother smiled. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can bring the greatest changes. Emma looked up from her book and hugged Shadow's neck tightly. "I didn't just give him food," she said softly. "I gave him love, and he gave it back to me." Shadow closed his eyes, his tail brushing the ground in gentle agreement. As weeks turned into months, the bond only grew stronger. Shadow became a familiar sight in the neighborhood. Instead of whispers of fear, people now greeted him with smiles. Children waved when he passed, adults nodded respectfully. He was no longer the stray dog. He was the guardian of the street. For Emma, Shadow was more than a pet. He was her best friend, her protector, her silent listener. When she was happy, he wagged his tail. When she was sad, he rested his head on her lap. When she was afraid, his steady presence gave her courage. One night, as Emma lay in bed, she whispered her gratitude to the stars. "Thank you for bringing Shadow to me. Thank you for letting me help him, and thank you for letting him help us." Outside her window, Shadow sat proudly, his ears alert, his eyes scanning the quiet street. The house was safe, the family was safe, and his heart was full. The story of a little girl and a stray dog had become something much greater. It was proof that kindness, no matter how small, can create bonds strong enough to change lives forever. Shadow, once a hungry stray wandering the streets, had found not only food, but love, trust, and a home. And Emma, once just a little girl with a sandwich, had found a friend who would stand by her side for the rest of her days. The unexpected had truly happened.